Sunnah. Well, we'll talk about Hadith tomorrow, and you will hear a lot about the Sunnah of the Prophet. Not every Hadith is a Sunnah. We will talk about that. Sunnah is the normative way of the Prophet doing something. Okay. So in fact, the words are more authentic than the actions. And the reason is that the actions are not always clear. You have to say a lot more about, why this thing happened, what else was happening, and so on and so on and so on. Whereas the words that are clear are easy. The second part is, when I say it is normative, this is what the Prophet generally did. Okay? And said. If he occasionally did it, it's at a lower level. Mm-hmm. And sometimes he would actually give different answers to the same thing. And that will come in the Hadith, and that's because he didn't want to make things difficult for everyone. So sometimes he would say, okay, to the same thing that he had said no, depending upon what was the stage in which the questioner was. Mm-hmm. So if a questioner comes and he's already done something and then asking, the Prophet ﷺ was more lenient with them. But if they had come to ask for something they had not yet done, then he will say, don't do it, or yes, do it, and so on. So he didn't give a fixed prescribed answer to every question, or the same question every time. So that's what normative means. Okay? I think we should mention here, although in Hadith we'll talk about it more. During the Prophet's time, if someone wanted to know what the answer to a question was, they would come and ask him. And whatever his answer was could become normative or become the answer, and people didn't question it. When we go to Hadith, we'll find that that is not as simple as it sounds. So these are the two sources. The Quran and the Hadith is a secondary source. Yeah? So you cannot turn things around, which some modern Muslims want to do, and to say, well, the Prophet's practice was not this, blah, blah, therefore the Quran couldn't mean that. Or, the Hadith says blah, 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 so this ayah must be, reinterpreted. No, so it is secondary, and the reason it is secondary is because it's more complicated. Mm-hmm. And there are many, many statements about the same thing. And you have to put them all together to understand why the differences and so on. And we'll talk about that in the Hadith. But then there are processes, such as, you need a consensus, and you need to understand and so on. But there is a source that is not generally mentioned, and that's called Urff. Urff is the custom. The Quran says this a lot. It is something that the society, wherever you are, that society, understands to be the right thing to do. Okay? You don't debate it. Urff, and Urff is different in some societies than the other, and the Urff is different from one time to another. Okay? But Urff is the source of law. You cannot make law that is against the Urff. If there are things in the Urff, you have to change the people's understanding of what they think is right. Okay? And that could take a long time. Okay? So it may well be that everyone agrees that the woman let me make it simpler. A man should go around and cover his head for the prayer. Well, if you are in cultures where when you go in front of someone out of respect, you take the hat off rather than putting it on. Okay? Well, so the urf isn't to put the hat on when you go in front of a judge. It is to take the hat off. So you cannot make a ruling from Sharia that says, well, you must put the hat on, because that's against the urf in a Western society. Well, covering the head is actually an urf even in Western societies. It is only recently that we have made covering the head as something peculiar and strange, because all ladies going to church, they would cover their head. Okay. Differently, what they always did. Going to the church, to the church, you never went in shorts. Well, Judy, I see people come in shorts, but in general, it doesn't happen. Okay. So you have to do something that is in accordance with the urf. If the urf says women who are properly covered will not draw the attention of strangers, and they will be protected because people will recognize them as people of virtue, then you cover. And actually the Quran prescribes the hijab because of that reason. But if you are in a situation where doing the hijab draws more attention to you rather than less, and you get more ridiculed than others, then the hijab in our traditional sense becomes against the urf. But you can make arguments for it. But in any case, it becomes not a requirement, but it becomes situational. Whoever wants to do it, do it. Whoever doesn't want to do it, they don't do it. But there are other ways of doing hijab, which is use less makeup, don't make out too much eye contact, don't draw attention, you don't have clothes that are too tight, don't draw attention to your body, keep your eyes down and not make eye contact, both for men and women. Okay? So there are other things for doing hijab, so you will still do the hijab, but you would not do what people do for the reasons that no longer work in the societies where it doesn't work. Anyway, so urf is beneficence, it's good custom, it's a convention, it's a tradition, it's a habit. Okay, so what are the objectives of law? Well, there are many objectives and people count them, but in fact, counting simply was done after the fact by lawyers, and they are not fixed in the sense you can add to them or subtract from them and so on, and you can count them differently. But the fundamental point, I think, is to define the objectives is in Islam, you are not encouraged to make laws that don't have to be made. Okay? So you don't make laws because you want to make laws. Or you have elected people who are busybodies, and since you don't keep them busy enough to think or to go home, they keep on making laws, trivial stuff. Okay? So in Islam, the reason the objectives were defined fairly early on is to say, don't make a law unless you can say, why you are doing this? What is the purpose? Okay? What is the purpose? And there are sometimes when the purpose is either contradict or overlap, so then you have to choose which one takes priority. So the first is preservation of faith. No one's right to practice their faith can be taken away. So every law must preserve to protect the faith rather than take it away. That's the first one. And actually, permission to fight was actually given for the same reason, to protect the faith. Second, preservation of self. Nafs, for who you are. Okay? Preserve your being. Okay? Not just life, because life alone isn't self. Preservation of reason. Okay? You don't want to make laws that forces people to become stupid. Okay? You want to make laws that preserves their right to reason and to think through things. So intellect, some people say, but that's what that is. Preservation of children. Well, actually, it's more complicated than that, because the scholars traditionally understood this to mean preservation of genealogy. Okay? In other words, every child should know where they came from. Every child should know who the father and the mother is. Preservation of genealogy, which is why in Islam we do not encourage women to give up their birth name. I mean, they may voluntarily want to do that, but even then we say, well, think about it. Why are you changing the name? What was your father's name? Okay. And there are some who hyphenate it nowadays, but there's no reason to hyphenate it because you are either one or the other. But if you are both, you can just use both names. Okay. So I'm being too strict here. It doesn't say that. But the fact is that this is what it means. So every child has the right to know who their father is and who their mother is. Okay? And many of our children today are angry because we have taken away from them the right to know who they are.